is Cyber Sidekicks, the weekly cybersecurity podcast hosted by Richmond Advisory Group's principal analysts, namely me, Christina Richmond.
And me, Rory Duncan. This podcast is your go-to partner for understanding the cybersecurity market, industry trends, and the real-world challenges of protecting organizations today. Hello, Christina. How are you?
Hello, Rory. Well, aside from still giggling about the vampire movie you were just telling me about, where Rory played a doctor.
Yeah.
Anyway, we won't devolve into giggles again, but yes, very funny.
Yeah.
I'm doing well. It's a sunny blue sky day that always makes me happy.
Nice.
How about you? What's going on over in Edinburgh?
Yeah. It's kind of spring has sprung.
Yeah.
But it's still not, we've had a couple of days we've been able to sit outside. But the other days haven't been so great. It's kind of, April showers, so we get that here. But, so that's okay. The windows have been cleaned inside and out.
I need to do my windows.
The house has been cleaned, so we're getting maximum sunshine in where it comes. But apart from that, we're doing not too bad. Thank you.
Well, that's beautiful. I mean, I feel like it should be April showers brings February flowers, because my daffodils came up in February. They didn't bloom until March.
Yeah.
They bloomed all of March, and now they're starting to dwindle.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I think spring is confused this year, but yes, spring has sprung here as well.
Exactly. So before we start, we should probably do a shout out to the folks about our newsletter, and really shout out to the new subscribers. Thanks, folks. We probably haven't done a shout out to new subscribers in the last maybe 3 or 4 weeks, but folk are quite happy to sign up for our newsletter. And if you haven't, then feel free to do so via our website. It's richmondadvisorygroup.com. So what's in the latest issue, Christina?
Yeah. So, we're kind of going back to March and just sharing in the newsletter our perspectives on the future of MDR. This is something that we talked about on the podcast middle of March. And we wrote a bunch of blogs on it. And then you wrote a lovely blog on how AI agents can power the next wave of MDR and XDR. So that's there's a link to that in the newsletter. And there's a link also to last week's podcast with former CIA officer and CISO Tradecraft podcast co-host Ross Young. He's talking about, money, one of those things that CISOs have to deal with and are sometimes challenged by. It's a good long newsletter, actually, this time around. It's called Signal, Not Noise. So, check it out, folks. It's weekly. Sometimes it's super short. We try to put a lot in there, but it's also, you can dip in and click on what you want and read or find what you like there.
Great. Thanks for that. So what else is on the show this week? Well, a couple of things we'll be discussing shortly. From IBM, some announcements, the new cybersecurity assessment service that they brought out, but also the IBM Autonomous Security service. So much anticipated agentic AI-based solution for vulnerability remediation. So, Christina, we'll be delving into these announcements, giving folks our take on what it means for current IBM customers, for prospective IBM customers, and the rest of the market.
Yes, indeed. And then we have a terrific guest. I mean, all of our guests are terrific, but I'm excited to have Ankur Shah come visit with us today. He is the co-founder and CEO of Straiker.ai. And Straiker is an interesting startup, serial entrepreneur venture focused on securing the AI lifecycle. There's a lot right now about visibility and monitoring of AI. And Straiker is one of these companies very myopically focused on how to gain that visibility and also monitor and respond with suggestions for remediation in runtime for AI, which is interesting. Also securing the development and experiment phase of AI projects, right? So I think It'll be interesting. What else do we know about them?
We talked quite a bit about them last year. I know
We did.
we had some, some observations about them. One of the things that you pointed out was that, unlike many vendors that focus on testing or monitoring already deployed systems, Straiker is noted for looking directly at the code during the experimentation process. So,
Yep.
it's not a radically new approach, but it's certainly a really new take on how to do it. If you do it at that stage, the idea is you then offset some of the issues later on. I think, to quote Ross Young from last week, if you've got a bad process and you make it faster or you automate it, you're only making stupid faster. I think that's what his comment was. So yeah, if it's about fixing things at the code level, then great. That's a really good approach. So
yeah, so I think Ankur's going to come on and tell us what keeps him up at night, and I would imagine it's looking at agents in the runtime environment. So we'll see what he has to say today. But let's do the news first, shall we? Yeah.
Well, I'll maybe read the headline, and then I would love your take on it, because this is one of your pet topics, and also perhaps you probably know a bit more than me about this, and the embargo is now off.
Yes, and there was a little teaser, RSA Day 2. We had a chat, our video podcast, for which I had to do hair and makeup. But okay, I did it. We talked with John Velisaris, and he was kind of teasing us about the art of the possible with autonomous security, and they've announced it. So tell us about it.
Yeah, lo and behold. So IBM has announced IBM Autonomous Security, which is a machine speed service composed of IBM AI agents that automates vulnerability remediation at a scale and pace, as they say, beyond what human teams alone can sustain. So back to this idea of agents acting autonomously and not necessarily waiting for humans to identify it and tell them what to fix, but doing this by themselves. So remediating these vulnerabilities through instructions that they've received, right?
That is right. They've also announced this assessment, right? And the assessment helps companies look at frontier model threats. As all of these frontier models are breaking the speed of light, if you will, coming out with new announcements, it's hard for us to put our arms around sprawling, complex IT estates, right, that are hard to codify to begin with. And then you add the frontier models in. It rapidly creates weaknesses or vulnerabilities and creates these attack paths. So IBM Consulting is now offering this new cybersecurity assessment around agentic models, LLM models, to help enterprises evaluate their readiness, honestly, for these AI-enabled threats, especially agentic-enabled threats. So together with their technology partners, they are doing these assessments into security gaps, policy weaknesses, AI exposures, etc. You can read the press release on IBM.com. But I think the thing that is most interesting to me here, they've been working on this for a while. And, we have to talk about agentic solutions in dog years, right? So agents have been around, I want to say, for 10 years, but it's been 10 months. You have to have that perspective, right?
Yeah, I know the relevant timescales are quite difficult to get your head around. And certainly, if you start to use any other measurements of development time, they tend to fall short. When we think about cloud technologies and so on, we could sort of keep up with them, kind of. But this is crazy. It reminds me of that there's a series on, I think, is it Disney Plus? It's called Monarch Legacy of Monsters, which is it's a Godzilla spin-off. It's pretty good, but part of it is where these monsters are, where these titans exist, is in a rift, which is a kind of an alternative world where these creatures are. But the issue is some folks get sucked down into this and have to escape, but a day is 2 years back in the real world. So it's this idea, it's almost like the same as agents, right? They've been away for a few weeks and it's 40 years, something like that. But it is that it gives that kind of the relative timescale and the pace of development. One of the things that I liked about this was the fact that you've got an assessment plus then a solution. Again, kind of like cloud. So in the early days of cloud, we had consultant services, which was about cloud readiness assessment. And then you would have services that then implemented some of those requirements. So I think it's quite good, because I think if you just have a service that is about autonomous security, you might not in fact know if it's relevant for you or not, or where it should be applied or not, or what parts of your organization should have it. So the fact that you've got an assessment as a service then with the autonomous security itself is a really good combination.
Yeah, I like it. I do. And I was excited about this offering. For me, it's as if they are creating a horizontal control plane that is providing asset intelligence, going into identity and vulnerability, going into governance, risk, and compliance across workflows that are no longer vertical. Like all of our AI assistants, even agentic capabilities, they're really verticalized. They're in one silo doing one thing quite often. Now, that is changing rapidly right now. Again, back to the dog years. I mean, I think I had 3 conversations in the last few days about this kind of how we need to stitch together across a control plane the visibility needed for agentic AI. Now, a lot of companies are doing it very much in their silo because they're startups and they have VC and they're meant to be very focused on what they can accomplish, which is great, right? That's fine. But I think what IBM brings to the party here is a layered system that integrates multiple data sources across their technology partners and across their own capabilities to provide a more comprehensive autonomous security workflow. And so having seen demos of it, I can say a few things about it. I mean, I don't want to say anything that might be NDA, but as they've already mentioned, they've got this kind of asset intelligence that they're bringing in a data lake. They're looking at identity. They're looking at governance, risk, and compliance. And it's all wrappered with this natural language kind of conversational interface so that it's vibe coding for the user in a sense, because the user then just says, hey, I want to know this about my environment. Yeah. So I think it's pretty cool. I was really excited to see it come out. I think we need this right now, especially on the back of some of the frontier model challenges that we've seen. I wouldn't call them leaks, but maybe some system property issues that they've had. So I think it's good timing.
Yeah, I think friend of the show and Mark Hughes. How would we describe Mark Hughes? He's a global managing partner of cybersecurity services at IBM Consulting, but we know him pretty well. You know him very well, Christina. I thought he summed it up pretty well when he said, this is a systemic approach. What I liked about that was he didn't mention, in fact, there's nothing in the press release that says holistic. I think holistic is now a bad word. It's banned. He said it requires a systemic defense because this is fast moving and it's systemic and increasingly autonomous, and puts it fairly plainly when he says AI powered offense demands AI powered defense. That's it, right? We've been talking about that for a while. The bad actors have the same tools as the good actors. The defenders and the attackers have the same capabilities at the hand. If one has more capability than the other, then that's a real issue.
Yeah, and in most cases, the attackers do have more capabilities. We've joked in cybersecurity for a long time that the attacker is better funded, that they have better benefits and PTO.
That's right.
But whether it's true or not, the defender is always on the back foot. Yep. And I think the new service, the assessment service, helps clients look at whether they're ready for agentic AI, which is in any security program, it's a good idea to assess where you are first before taking something new on. And then the autonomous security capabilities that IBM has launched, I think, help them, to your point, then put the technology in place. So, I would say Mark has a long career in cybersecurity. Yes, I've known him for a long time. I don't know, 15 years, something like that. And he has seen a lot. And we had him on the podcast a while ago where he was talking about securing the boring bits with agents. So they're making good on this.
Yeah.
And I was surprised that they had made as much progress after we talked to Mark, and he said, wouldn't it be great if we could autonomously secure the boring bits? And that's what we talked to John Velasaris about as well on the podcast.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great? And I didn't realize they had made so much progress. And really, I don't say this very often, Rory, but I have not seen another solution like this out in the market. Have you?
No, there's bits. Back to your point, right?
Yep.
There are many, many companies doing many, many different bits of this. But at a systemic level, across the horizontal way, no. I think they're the first.
And for integrated horizontally, indeed.
And for IBM, that's a pretty good show, right? Because they are often criticized for being kind of a slow-moving behemoth when it comes to IT. Certainly, when I was there, that was one of the criticisms. But I think this is showing that they had a plan, they knew what they were doing, and then they just executed in it. So good for them.
Well, and having had a demo from some of the architects, there's some really smart innovators at IBM. And that is IBM's legacy. So very fun and cool to be at the front line of that for both of us, to be able to see what's coming and see how it was being built. And then, ta-da, it has been launched. And I think there's more to come.
Yeah.
And we don't want to steal their thunder, but it's very exciting times.
It is indeed. So, folks, we'll be following this closely as it's launched, and we'll follow up with you in future episodes. So this week's special guest is Ankur Shah, co-founder and CEO of Straiker. Hello, Ankur. How are you doing? Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Rory. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. And we were just discussing tea in the intro there. So we've all got something to drink at the moment. Although it's a bit too warm here for tea, I just have some juice. But you've got some masala chai, I think, Ankur.
Yeah, I'm a masala chai kind of guy. That's what gets me going in the morning.
Nice. So I know you've talked with Christina before. We've had some of your other colleagues in discussions about various things. We didn't get a chance to meet, or I didn't get a chance to meet anybody from the team at RSAC. But, we've talked about Straiker in the past, and I know Christina gave a little bit of an introduction at the beginning of the show. But it'd be great just to get a little bit of perspective on Straiker and what you're doing. Once Christina has asked you the kind of first question, Christina.
Yeah, so Ankur, I actually have a couple of questions now. And so we're changing the format just a little bit. And you can start with either one of them if you like. The one that we've been using for many months now is what keeps you up at night. And I think that's still a good one because it leads our guests to talk about what they're focused on, what Straiker is focused on in your case. What are some of the things that need to be solved in our world? But the other thing I'd love you to think about is what are you grateful for? And it can be personal. I love personal discussion on the show. And it can also be technology innovation or market mentors, anything that you think about. So what keeps you up at night? Tell us a little bit about Straiker and how you're solving some of those things that keep you up at night. And then what are you grateful for?
Yeah, great questions. And they're both at completely odds with each other. The first one really is what's happening in the battlefield. And the second one actually allows you to take a step back and put things in perspective. Maybe I'll start with the first one. Look, I have been in technology for the last 25 years. Many years ago, I built an e-commerce company during the internet era. And then I was in mobile and then cloud for the last decade and a half. And for the last 2 years, and I guess until I hang up the boots, I'm going to be doing stuff at the intersection of AI and security. So that obviously is top of mind. I try to take at least a few hours of sleep. But the thing that I think about, obviously, there's a company building is hard, startup building is hard.
Yeah.
We live in a day and age where it's just a lot of noise. So cutting above the noise and getting your voice, your word out there is difficult. So you got to constantly think about how you do that as a startup. Everything was easy. My last startup got acquired by Palo Alto, so I had many customers and everything. In startups, everything gets back to being difficult. So obviously, there's the hiring and culture and product and customer and fundraise and there's all kinds of stuff that goes on. But I think the thing that when I do have time and sometimes I lose sleep over is just think about the future of technology. I've seen, like I said, like all technology shift. I've never seen anything like this before. All the previous shifts pale in comparison compared to AI. And if you really take a step back, I mean, in few years, 90% of the enterprise will be run by AI agents, not by
Crazy.
humans.
Yeah.
We live in a really different times, and in that day and age where everything is run by agents, what does security paradigm look like? Do we need agent kill switch? Unplug, control, alt, delete, shut down the whole thing. So that's where cyber attacks and all of that becomes very prevalent. But I'm a eternal optimist, so I think about a incredible future for humanity where AI and these agents are helping our workforce, working our families, but we want to make sure it's done in a safe way.
Yeah, I would imagine that is something that you're thinking about, especially with what you're doing at Straiker. And we mentioned at the beginning of the show that Straiker is, able to look at code before it's deployed in the development environment and also at runtime. And I hope that's accurate. And if it's not, please tell me. But that is something from a monitoring perspective. We don't have visibility easily into the creation, right, of AI, into the creation of code that will be running the enterprise, to your point.
Yeah, you're right. Look at RSA. The headline for our product launch was Striker secures agents building agents, which kind of clues you into what kind of thing we're building. But you're right. Like these coding agents are building other agents, and a whole bunch of people are consuming these agents. So we need to secure the thing that's building I guess the future of workforce. So we spend a lot of time on securing what we call the coding agent platforms, and the attack surface is no longer kind of the coding agents building malicious code, but it's about all the access that these agents have to developers' computers, public internet, everything that the enterprises hold dearly, what I call enterprise OS, infrastructure, data, supply chain, the whole thing. And this is where sort of securing that becomes really important because, we just kind of handed a machine gun to a whole bunch of people who don't know how to operate a knife.
Yeah.
And if not careful, they're going to shoot themselves and everybody around them. And we want them to do it in a safe way.
Yeah, I love that. Rock Lambros, who is a friend of the show, who's been on a couple of times, we're just publishing a blog, and in it, he was interviewed by one of our colleagues, and in it he says, you have to treat agents like the dumbest intern. Because they will work the mission that we have prescribed with the access that we may have allowed them without even intending to. And they have access to that entire OS that you just mentioned. And yet they don't know how to work a knife, to your point.
Yeah, totally. It's a good way to think about it. The agents, for them to be effective, and the trade-off is almost always that, you can kind of oversee the intern's work. These agents have autonomy and access. With autonomy comes responsibility. So a lot of what we do with the enterprise is not so much having referees within the enterprise, like overlooking at every bit of work that agents are doing, but it's, get them to do it, but do it on a paved path, have guardrails in place so that they don't go all over. I think that's going to be really, really important because we're talking, critical infrastructures, our banks, our healthcare, nuclear power plants, everything, self-driving, everything will have autonomy, and we gotta put those guardrails in place.
In a way, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but some of the things that we all wish some of the larger companies had done in the first place. The reason I say that is if you look at the OWASP agentic AI SecOps framework, Straiker, it's pretty clearly highlighted as one of the only a few companies, there's only about 7, maybe less, operating in the development and experiment pillar. Now, in theory, that should be the other way around, right? You should be one of dozens of companies because that's where it starts. If you get that correct at that stage, then many of the other aspects later on, when it comes to, say, deployment and management of AI agents, is going to be easier. It seems as if you guys are focusing on what everybody should have been focusing on in the first place. The fact that you're doing it now is great, but is it the case that we're maybe slightly too late? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's like a almost a two-parter. Whenever technology shift happens, there's the books on this, Innovator's Dilemma. The incumbents are generally caught off guard because they've got existing businesses to protect. That's not going anywhere, and a big technology shift happens, and all of a sudden everybody's caught off guard, right? Like even in the AI wars, Google had over 75% of all AI talent on the planet, and yet OpenAI, Research Lab won, and Anthropic. And we've seen this movie play out, like, in mobile era, a PC company won, Apple. And in the cloud era, an e-commerce company of all things, Amazon, ended up prevailing. It should have been no-brainer for the incumbents. So we've seen this movie play out, and that's because of dedicated, focused, small team on a mission to solve a fundamental problem, almost always outcompetes and beats the incumbents. So that's why you see, companies like us, we're taking risks, we're hyper focused, we don't have any other thing to do. This is existential for us. This either works or we die. And that brings in a lot of focus. And the second thing is, as the market starts to become mature, I mean, we're certainly early. You are right, like in OWASP, we're thankful to the OWASP community for including us. But you're going to see new entrants. But I personally never think in cyber that it's too late. I think customers are starting to deploy agents. I think we need to do it sooner than later. When I did cloud security before, I can say that customers started putting in place security guardrails maybe many years after adding cloud. But there's generally awareness that something could go wrong. I think Frontier Labs are doing a good job educating the general public that we got to use these technologies in a safe and secure manner. So, I think we need to move fast as these agents get deployed. We need to have security harnesses and guardrails in place, and wait for our agent overlords to take over the workplace in a safe way.
Oh, I was about to say, I really love your optimism, and then you completely shattered that. But by talking about agent overlords, I thought your initial response was quite mature and even, but never mind. I think, Christina, you were going to ask something just before I went in there.
I just thought, I love it. The agent overlords. I think it was a great response, even with the last little symbol of the drum set. I thought that was great. Let's switch to what you're grateful for, Ankur. I mean, you have been an entrepreneur for quite a long time. You've been in the space for a long time. I loved your answer about what keeps you up at night. I mean, it's the business of being a startup and doing it well, and making sure to cover so many different aspects of the business, almost like all the different balls or plates in the air you're having to cover. But from a gratitude perspective, tell us what you're grateful for, either technologically or personally.
Yeah, it's such a good question because it really helps put things in perspective. And to be honest, like in the fog of war, which I am in almost every day in this company building, you don't get a lot of time to cut above the noise and think about it. But I do. Look, at the end of the day, focusing on what's most important, taking a step back kind of helps you put things in perspective. So like to me, it's a blessing to have a good health, an incredible family, and a great team in that order. That's what I'm thankful for. Like it's something you can't take for granted. If you have it, you can basically fight any war that's out there. It's important to take a step back. And sometimes in my role, both at home and at work, it's everything is just go, go, go. What have we done lately? but it's just to take a step back and obviously thank your family and the teammates, and it's super important. CEOs especially almost always assume that everybody's obviously as clocked in as you are, as locked in as you are. Never the case. People have their own dreams and aspirations. Sometimes it's important to thank them for joining my mission, our mission. So it's good health, family, and having a great team.
Yeah, I really like it. And I know Ankur needs to leave us fairly quickly this morning for an important customer meeting. So we're going to let you go in just a moment. But I think this new question is a good way to wrap up a chat, because what I like about it is we so often look at the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We so often look at what the technological solution is to that FUD, or what the new direction of a technology is and the challenges it brings. And I think wrapping up on gratitude is something that I certainly personally want to remember to focus on a daily basis. This was great. And please come back again. Maybe do one of our monthly video podcasts. That would be fun.
Because obviously,
then you could, you can do the hair and makeup.
Yeah. See, you were already prepared, Ankur. So there you go. That means you must come on the first video.
You must.
But we'll let you go now. Thanks for coming on. Great to chat with you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that was a great chat with Ankur. Christina, what a nice guy. I thought he was a very genuine, lovely guy.
Very down to earth.
Yeah, very down to earth, very thoughtful, and also a fellow tea drinker. So,
yeah, and I loved the optimism. I think it's important, especially for the young folks. Almost every technological advance has been positive. And why should AI be any different? Now, we are seeing some crazy things happening with layoffs and the younger generation worried about their line of work. But what if he were right? And I love that optimism that we should look at this as a force for good. I love the perspective that he brings to his work, that it is health and family and his team that matter to him and that he's grateful for.
Yeah.
So I think he is a Renaissance man, to your point offline, that he perhaps, is really one of these people who can hold that whole vision as one. Yeah, I really enjoyed the chat.
Fine. Okay. I shall bite my tongue on my doom-mongery then.
No doom-mongery.
Well,
no more vampires.
Oh no, I'll save it for the next episode. But yeah, that was great. So yeah, thanks, Christina. Another really interesting, great episode. Always fantastic to chat with you and then with our guests. So folks, thanks for listening. We always appreciate the feedback you give us. And subscription, obviously, to our newsletter would be great. If you'd like to speak to us or reach out to us, probably email is the best place to do that. You can reach me. It's Rory at richmondadvisorygroup.com
and Christina at richmondadvisorygroup.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, great. Okay. So until next week, folks, stay safe. Thanks for your feedback, and we look forward to you joining us again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.